We are beginning the look at the life of Joseph today, just kind of the start of what's happening in this. However, don't get real excited because next week we're not going to be there. Next week we are going to be looking at Matthew 26, the institution of the Lord's table, and we will be spending our time on that. So if you want to be reading ahead and kind of prepare your heart and mind for that, we'll be looking at Matthew 26 and the institution of the Lord's table. Let's pray. Father, in these next minutes, please teach us and guide us. Through your Spirit, may we be encouraged, may we be challenged, may we be reminded of your primacy in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. What a life. Raised as a future heir of a wealthy Jewish patriarch, he fell into slavery in a far-off Gentile land, but later rose to prominence as the second in command of the greatest country in the world at that time. He was loved, he was hated, he was favored, he was abused, he was tempted, he was trusted, he was exalted, and he was abased. Yet at no point in his 110-year life, as we can tell from what is recorded for us in the Scripture, did Joseph take his eyes off of God, or it seems cease to trust him. When he experienced great adversity, it did not make him a hard, bitter person. Prosperity didn't ruin him. He was the same in private as he was in public. This is the narrative of a truly great man. You know, the story of Abraham is long, and it's probably the most important story in or narrative in the book of Genesis, because this is where God's plan is revealed and starts with the Jewish nation. Of course, at the fall, God's original plan of sending a Redeemer is revealed, but we're narrowing it down now to a family of people. But it's interesting that the story of Joseph equals the number of chapters that are consumed by the life of Abraham. And if you count the verses, Joseph's, the writings about Joseph in the Old Testament are 25% longer than the record of Abraham. But he doesn't figure much in the New Testament. I mean, you see a lot of Abraham and Moses in the New Testament. We have more spoken words by Joseph that are recorded than any other character in the Old Testament. And yet he's not quoted once in the New Testament. Very, very fascinating. Now, one dangerous temptation that we're going to face in interpreting Joseph's actions is the text rarely tells us why Joseph did something. And so we're tempted to attribute motive to him based on our opinion of Joseph, or maybe even our own past experience. For example, Why did Joseph tell his dreams? Well, if you believe that Joseph was some cocky teenager that needed to be taken down a peg or two, he was strutting out and boasting to his brothers. You know what? I'm better than you are. And so you see that this is somebody that God is going to have to take down and break before he can use him. Or if you are favorably disposed to Joseph, you might think that he is amazed by the things that have been told him and what they could portend. We don't know. And so we have to be very careful when we make judgments. And if you hear me make a judgment, probably positive, say, be careful, Pastor. You don't know that that was really his motive unless the text tells us that. And one last thought I'd like to touch on before we get to the narrative is the belief that Joseph is an example or a type of Jesus. You say, well, what in the world are you talking about when you say Joseph is a type of Jesus? Well, typology is a branch of biblical interpretation in which an element found in the Old Testament prefigures something that comes in the New Testament or is completed in the Old Testament. The initial example is called the type. The fulfillment of that type or the completion of that type is called the antitype. Not anti-type, but anti as in before type. Either the type or the antitype may be a person, it may be a thing or an event, but often it is messianic and deals with the concept of salvation. One example that's easy to see that you'll be familiar with is in John 3, right before John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, right? Right before that, it says, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man must be lifted up. You'll remember in Numbers 21, when the Israelites were in their Exodus journey and were attacked by venomous, they called them fiery serpents, and their bite was lethal and painful. And God said to Moses, make a bronze serpent and put it up on a pole. And when the people look on that pole, they will be healed. And you probably know that that serpent on the post is the symbol of the medical community. And it's not that that was an idol that had any power. The idea was that if you looked at that in faith and believed that God would take care of what ailed you, you would be healed. And the antitype in John is if you look on that man hanging on a cross and believe that he can save you, you will be saved. That is the concept of type and antitype. Some ways Bible students see Joseph as prefiguring Jesus are these. He went from lowliness to exaltation. He went from slavery to liberty, from suffering to glory. Joseph suffered the jealousy and hatred of his brethren, just as Jesus suffered the hatred and jealousy of the Jewish leaders. In fact, his being sold prefigured Judas's betrayal of Jesus, the fulfillment of Joseph's prophetic dreams fulfill the exaltation of Jesus, and so on. And one author even comes up with 101 ways that Jesus or that Joseph was a type of Jesus. That may be going a little bit around the corner, but he was able to do it. Well, let's look at the text this morning. First of all, we see the concept of hatred. In Genesis 37, Jacob lived in the land. I don't have a screen back there. Is that because of malfunction, or we just haven't done it yet? Oh, the magic of modern electronics. Thank you. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. And this is an account of Jacob. So this is the genealogy. Here is Jacob's posterity. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Remember, the handmaids of both Leah and Rachel. So they weren't blood brothers, they were brothers by, and even Joseph's only real blood brother was Benjamin, and the rest were all half-brothers. And the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah and his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Okay, how do you look at this kid? Is he a teenage tattletale? Again, that thinks he's hot stuff because he's the favorite son, or is he informing his father something that that Jacob needs to know about his brother's action? How are you going to interpret that? We don't know what his motivation was. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any of the other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. The Hebrew actually says they could not say shalom to him, the normal Hebrew greeting of peace. Are there people that you don't want to say good morning to because you don't want them to have a good morning? You want them to suffer. And so you might just say morning or hello. That's kind of the position that the brothers were in. They couldn't wish. We wish peace on you, Joseph. No, we don't. We wish turmoil and trouble on you, Joseph. And so they couldn't even speak peace to their brother. Now, what was the robe spoken about here? Many think that it was a long robe that went down below the knees and more around the ankles, which would have made it unsuitable for working in. And so it was more the symbol of a supervisor. Pete, you know what I'm talking about. Any of the rest of you that have worked construction, when you go to a construction site, who did you want to talk to? You wanted to talk to the white hat, right? The white hat was the supervisor, at least on our crew he was. And so this was the sign that this little kid was in charge of these grown men. Now, it wasn't easy for Joseph to work alongside these brothers because their way of life was different than his. You will hear me repeat over and over again, and I may be wrong, but I think this is a fair assumption that I make, that the brothers were the sons of Jacob, and Joseph was the son of Israel. Most of Joseph's experience with his father was after God had dealt with him at Peniel. And so he was more spiritually tuned to his brothers, so it wasn't easy because their life was different than his. What were they doing? It says he brought a bad report. Did he make something up and lie about them? What we see about his character, that seems doubtful to me. And I'm one of those guys that tend to give Joseph the benefit of the doubt and believe that his motives are pure. So I'm just telling you kind of where I'm coming from. What were they doing? Were they stealing from their father? Were they bringing trouble on the family because of what they were doing to other shepherds? We don't know. All we know is he brought a bad report, and that made him bitter. I mean, that was just one more thing. And the sad thing is that Jacob knew what it was like to not be the favorite son of your father. He had been in that position. He should have been more judicious in his treatment of Joseph. And that's why I spent these last many weeks going through the dynamics of this family to show why there is so much pathology, why this is such a dysfunctional family, because of how the family interrelated with each other, and just the mixed marriage that's in there, that, 4 different wives. And the problems that come from, imagine that you're one of the 6 sons of Leah. And you realize that this son is the son of the man and the woman, really the woman, who made their mother cry herself to sleep at night because her husband didn't love her. How are you going to feel toward that brother that hurt your mother? No wonder they hated him, really. And so Jacob was injudicious in some of his actions toward Joseph. So what happens is envy is sown. Verse 5, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. And he said, listen to the dream I had. He said there were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to it. Hey, Joseph, you've got a match. You want me to add a little gasoline here in this situation, and we'll see how we can get this fire really going? Okay, and his brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. And then he had another dream and said to his brothers, listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And his when he told them, his father, as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him But his father kept the matter in his heart or his mind. Just kind of filed it away. This is an interesting occurrence. The sin of envy is one of Satan's greatest tools. Envy causes inward pain when we see other people succeed instead of us. Now, if I were consumed by all things automotive and wanting the coolest car around and so on, I'd probably envy Vernon when he drives into the parking lot in his cool cars and say, "Boy, what does he have? Why can he have those? Why can't I have those?" The opposite of that is being glad that people have the opportunity to succeed and to enjoy something that they actually are able to enjoy. But envy is a joy killer. It causes pain and has a twin sister, or a twin anyway. And envy's twin is malice. Not only does it cause you pain to see somebody have something that you would like or that you think you deserve, but it causes you to hate them or wish evil on them and see them fail as well. And when envy and malice are together in a situation, they can create division and slander and unwarranted criticism. That is why envy and malice are so dangerous in the church of Jesus Christ. Because it can divide the church. Because one group isn't getting what they think they should have, and this other group or these other people are getting it. And like I said, that is deadly when that spirit strikes the church. It is one of Satan's greatest tools, as I said. Why did Joseph share the dream? Again, is he this cocky teenager saying, you might as well get used to it now. Start bowing down to me and listening because here I am. He possibly could have been more judicious and wiser in his sharing. He could have been more discreet. But obviously, it was God's will that Joseph recount this dream not only to his brothers but to his father as well, because God is going to use that dream to remind them in 13 years that he had a purpose, that he had a plan that he was working through. And they were going to be able to look back and say, wow, look at this. Here we are really bowing down to him. And God had a purpose in that. Now, I will step outside of the text here for a minute and just give my own prejudices and my own problems with this whole thing. And that is, why did it take 13 years? We've been there, haven't we? We have walked through those hard, dry times where the heavens seem to be brass. I love the way one preacher talked about the servants of the king disappointing Joseph when he said, "Remember me when you're out," to the butler or to the cupbearer. And he said, "For sure, as soon as I go." And so he describes Joseph as saying, the guy leaves and he hears a knock on the door, somebody wanting entrance into the prison, and he runs to the door because he knows it's his deliverance. And pretty soon he just kind of walks over to the door after a few weeks. And then there comes a time when he hears somebody at the door and he might look over to see, is this the time that is coming for my release? And finally, he doesn't even pay any attention when somebody comes to the door anymore because he knows that he's stuck there. 13 years of his life in this situation. Why? We don't know. Why does not God answer our situations immediately? I wish I could tell you. Obviously, there are things that have to be fulfilled and done in the meantime. But we are an impatient people. Well, so the envy and malice bring about violence. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, now remember what Shechem is. Shechem is the place where they murdered the whole town and made their name mud. And their sons are going back over to that area. Okay, and when Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. And he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers. You speak peace to them, even if they won't speak peace to you, and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. You know, supervisor, go out and do your job. Go supervise the workers. And he sent him off to the valley of Hebron, and Joseph arrived at Shechem. A man found him wandering around and said to him, what are you looking for? And he said, I'm looking for my brothers, can you tell me where they're grazing their flocks? He said, they've moved on from here. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. And so Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan, and they saw him in the distance and when he reached them, they plotted to kill him. So I've got some questions here. First of all, why did they go 50 miles away? Why did they go back to Shechem when the grazing land was probably sufficient and perfectly good close to where they were? I assume, and I don't know why Israel didn't know, they were probably up to no good. And they go to Shechem and then leave Shechem and go to Dothan. But Dothan was about a day's journey from Shechem. And so they obviously had acquaintances in that area. They were checking up on old buddies and possibly doing what old buddies do. I'm supposing, but that would be my answer to why would they go 50 miles away. And then why would they go to a dangerous area like Shechem is because they knew they had people there that they could count on and have a good time with, probably. And then, finally, why send Joseph when he knew that his brothers hated him? Why rub their face in it? To have Joseph show up and say, okay, guys, you carrying out the plan? You doing this? You doing this? And obviously, God in his wisdom and providence was working to accomplish his purpose for Jacob and his family and literally the world. God had ordained that Joseph was to go down to Egypt, and this is how the plan would be accomplished, is by his brothers. So they had a conspiracy. They saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. He said, here comes the dreamer. They said to each other, come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Ha, ha, ha. And when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands and said, let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Throw him out. Throw him down here in the cistern, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. Why Reuben would do that, we don't know. If because he didn't want to be involved in murder, or if he was trying to get his first place back with his father, to get back in his good graces after sinning against his handmaiden, Bilhah. And so he took him and threw him. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of the robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into a cistern, and the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. The brothers' hatred had metastasized so deeply that they are willing to kill their brother. Who called for his death? We don't know. But it was Reuben's idea to throw him in the pit because he planned to rescue Joseph later. Okay, indifference. And they took him and threw him in the cistern. Now the cistern was empty and there was no water in it. And as they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay the hands on him after all. For he's our brother, I mean, really. And not only that, why not get a buck out of it besides? And so when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for the 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. Now there's a problem in the text here I just want to make you aware of. I don't want to get into this, and you probably don't care. But they talk about the Ishmaelites and the Midianites. So they talk about two different people, or are they using two different names for the same group of people? Because it says the Midianites pulled him out of the pit, not the brothers. And so the brothers really didn't sell him, is the argument. But if it's one and the same, the brothers sold him to the Midianites, and the Midianites took him up out of the pit. That's just, if you got more questions about that, you can talk to me about that later. How could they sit there and listen to their brother scream from the bottom of that pit? How terrified would you be to be put in a pit in the desert, even if it was dry? Are there snakes down there? What kind of spiders? Venomous insects? It's dark, you can't see. You don't know what's there. And he's screaming, guys, guys, guys. And they sit there with their AirPods in their ear, listening to their phone while he's screaming and eat their lunch like absolutely nothing has happened. That shows their deep hatred and the hardness of their heart. And then the deception, Reuben returns to the cistern. He saw Joseph was not there. He tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy isn't there. Where can I turn now? And so they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in blood. They took it, the ornamental robe, back to their father and said, we found this, examine it to see whether it's your son's robe. He recognized it and said, this is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. And Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. And all of his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, in mourning I will go down to the grave to my son. And so his father wept for him. And meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. His brothers know what his sympathies are because Reuben's beside himself when Joseph is in the pit. So they know that his sympathies were with Joseph. But they sell him to this caravan, and the traders sell him in Egypt. Years before, Jacob had deceived his father with a goat. And now it was coming around back on him. They don't tell him he's dead. that Joseph is dead, Israel jumps to that conclusion. All they did is, oh, here's his coat. And so he just concludes that has happened. Okay, this is the end of what we're going to look at this morning, but it reminds us that we don't know, as I said earlier, we don't know how God is working in our life. And we don't see it, and it frustrates us. And we wish we knew the plan. And we wish we knew the person that was going to take us out of this situation. But we don't. We have to believe that God loves us and trusts him. And I simply commend you to that God who loves you enough to take your sin from you, to send his son to die in your place. Let's pray. Father, dismiss us now with your protection. We thank you for this time, for us to be able to look at your word, and we ask now that, again, we will be encouraged and instructed by these truths in Jesus' name.